This PowerPoint is about special education settings. There are currently 6 different options for alternative placement, from least restrictive to most restrictive, starting out with just the general education class. This includes students who receive most of their education program in a general education classroom and receive special education and related services outside this classroom for less than 21% of the day. It includes children placed in a general education class and receiving special education within this class, as well as children placed in a general education class and receiving special education outside this room. The next one is a resource room. This includes students who receive special education and related services outside the general education classroom for at least 21% of the day, but not more than 60% of the day. This may include students placed in resources room with part-time instruction in a general education class. The third one is a separate class. This includes students who receive special education and related services outside the general education classroom for more than 60% of the school day. Students may be placed in a separate class with part-time instruction in another placement or placed in a separate classes full-time on a regular school campus. The fourth one is separate school. This includes students who receive education and related services in a separate day schools for more than 50% of the school day. The fifth one is a residential facility. This includes students who receive education in a public or private residential facility for more than 50% of the school day. And the final, most restrictive option is homebound or hospital setting. And this includes students placed in and receiving special education in a homebound or hospital program. A separate school is for students with a learning disability that attend during the day and then they return home after school. So it can be full-time, but it also may just be for half the day and then they'll spend the remaining part of their day at a public school. And successful pilot programs are often developed at separate schools, which then are used in other settings. Some advantages are that it often serves students with learning disabilities and related mild disabilities well. They provide the only feasible option for certain students, so that's going back to like the most restrictive environment or to the least restrictive environment. Sometimes kids can only go and do well here. A disadvantage is that it usually is really expensive to parents. It could also be a big distance traveling. They may have to travel far to go to this school. And then lack of opportunity to be with students in the general education population.
Methods that research has backed and proven to be effective. So that's one example. Inclusion can also help banish any stereotypes about like being different by allowing students in the classroom to see that everyone is different, has different strengths and weaknesses, and they can learn from that. And this in turn then has shown to create more friendships between peers that may have not happened without inclusion. So the students who would normally be taken out of the classroom are now included in the classroom, and they kind of get to like know they're typically developing peers and vice versa, and they kind of banish those and foster friendships. And then lastly, inclusion can involve bringing specialty teachers into the class, such as like reading or speech specialists that can help all students. So kind of depends on the school and what they want to do with that, but that's an option for some. And then some cons of inclusion include that it's kind of unknown the best ways to implement it since there's so many ways and like there's not one set. And it's also kind of up to each school and school system and their discretion, since there's not like, it just states that they have to be educated in their least restrictive environment, so you can kind of take with that as you want. And the research is still kind of sparse on some of the methods, so like there's a lot of research out there, but not necessarily a lot of research on one inclusion method and how they should best all work together. And then teachers are often unprepared for inclusion and lack the proper training and knowledge of disabilities and proper inclusion methods. So that puts a lot of stress on the general education teachers, and it can cause them to have like some reservations about it since they don't have the training. Like if you think about it, special education teachers go through years and hours of trainings, and some of these general education teachers don't have that experience, so it's a little nerve-wracking and stuff like that. But that is it for general education inclusive classrooms.
So, separate classroom setting, it allows students to be in a smaller classroom with other special education students in a regular school. And students in separate classroom settings are sometimes able to join other general education classes for certain subjects, depending on what their needs are for special education services that they're receiving, their interests, things like that. For example, I know a student that I worked with in high school, and he was able to take avionics, which is how circuits and the technological aspect of how an airplane functions. And that was something that he was really interested in while he was still in the special education class. And so within the separate classroom settings, they allow him to be able to attend those classes in avionics. So on the spectrum of least to most restrictive environments, it lays close to the middle. If you were to look at a spectrum, it's basically kind of like 60% when you're looking at the amount of the school day that the student is spending in that separate classroom setting. So if you are in the separate classroom setting, you are receiving special education or related services outside the gen ed classroom. And again, that is for 60% of the school day. And the IDEA specifies within the LRE requirements that students should be with kids in general education to the maximum extent that is appropriate, which just shows that separate classroom settings allow students to have those opportunities while, yes, the majority of their day is in a specific special education classroom. They're still able to have those opportunities come to them when they're able to go join other classes that interest them, that they're able to take outside of their services. So this video is one that I found was really interesting to get perspective from a student's point of view in a special education program. And it also gives a really good point of view in transition from talking about separated classrooms where they do have opportunities to be with other students in gen ed classrooms, and they can make those relationships. And I think that this video just kind of helps us understand how students in special education classrooms feel on a day-to-day basis and understand what they are wanting and how they feel. So with that, it's also helpful for other students to see who are in the gen ed classrooms, because they're the ones who are surrounding them and they should be giving them that support and friendship, but sometimes don't always know how to. So I just thought that this was a good representation of that. So this video will be linked outside of this PowerPoint, or if you want, you can type in the link that is on this page. Finally, we have our reference page.